With question number one, in this situation, farmers would be worse off and consumers would be better off. And as we've learned from this chapter, there would be an overall net gain as resources would be freed up for not only the government, but also for consumers, and there would also be a reduction of deadweight loss. What would most likely happen is that Japanese rice farmers would start lobbying in order to protect those trade barriers in order to protect their industry. With question number two, sadly, the number of workers in the rice producing industry would fall, but over the next few years, most likely they would go on to new fields and to find work relatively quickly as new jobs get created. There is a great real life example of in Fukushima, Japan, where there's currently an energy crisis going on in Japan as they're straying away from nuclear energy and they've been vastly importing large amounts of coal and other non renewable fuels. So in Fukushima, particularly, they have started putting up tons and tons of solar panels, sometimes even putting solar panels over previous rice fields, as that energy and that resource is far more important than the rice they would have produced.
So, question three basically asked who is hurt by imported automobiles and who benefits? So, domestic producers of automobiles are hurt because they lose customers and therefore lose money to the foreign automobiles. And since they have less revenue, those producers are forced to slow down production and cut workers, therefore leaving people out of a job. But however, on the other side, the customers benefit because the competition lowers prices and allows for a wider variety and sometimes higher quality of products. Question four asks, why do the bumper stickers that say "out of money yet, keep taxing foreign sugar" or "Hungary is probably because domestic sugar is so expensive" are not popular? So this is because people are not aware of the impacts tariffs have on them. Because the US does not produce a lot of sugar, people are unaware of how much more they are paying than they could have been if there were no tariffs. Also, these tariffs create jobs in the sugar industry, which people tend to see in a more positive light. Question 5 asks, do price ceilings create surpluses or shortages? And the answer is shortages because producers are unable to get enough revenue to increase production when demand increases. The horizontal line in figure 9.1 as shown to the right represents the world price. And why do people in this country only buy this quantity of units and why don't they buy more? This is because the quantity bought is based on the demand curve. People only buy how much they actually want or need, and just because the product is less expensive does not mean people need or want more of it.
Question 6. So in this figure, the quantity axis for quantity supply free trade is right here, and the quantity demand in free trade is right here. And the gap between these two quantities is the exports by this country. And the domestic consumption is given by the difference between the quantity free trade and this part right here. And the domestic production is this entire part that is produced in the domestic market. So will the domestic buyers pay more? Yes, the domestic buyers will be paying more, and also they'll be having a lower quantity to purchase. So the domestic demanders will not support the free trade because, as you can see, the price range, they pay really high prices and the quantity they get is very low too, and therefore their consumer surplus is very tiny. Question 7. This thinking leads to satisfying only self-interest because if you're not trading with others, you're not making a higher profit. And if you're buying goods in a local area, you're only trying to help the economy of the local area, like the state or the city. This goes back to the idea, a big idea 5 in chapter 1, when two countries specialize in a good, both the countries have a higher net profit. And in the end, when they traded, they both made a higher profit than when they did not trade. So therefore, trading is better off for both. Question 8. So in this, we got to identify different parts. The increase in producer surplus because of the tariff is given by the C, and the loss in consumer surplus is given by the area of C, D, E, F, and G. The revenue earned by the government due to tariff is the area of E and F, and the deadweight loss is D and G.
So we can calculate this. So producer surplus is area C, which is $650,250,000. The loss in consumer surplus is area C plus D plus E plus F plus G, which is $841,500,000. The total amount of deadweight loss is $46,750,000. The amount of revenue earned by the government due to these tariffs is $144,500,000. And in area D, so there's $21,250,000 from which represents overproduction of U.S. steel suppliers and producers, and then $25,500,000 from area G, which represents underconsumption. And then question 10. So looking at the graph, as you can see it here to the right, we can see that the free trade equilibrium is part A. So that's 24 billion pounds supplied at the price of 9 cents. Tariffs equilibrium is 21 billion pounds supplied at the price of 20 cents. Wasted resources is area B on here on the graph. Lost gains from trade is area C, and then tariff revenues is area D. So the first part asks about quotas versus tariffs, and honestly, I think international producers would rather have a tariff. And why is that? So a tariff raises the price of goods to the point where domestic goods can be competitive with international goods. Now, this upticks the price of international goods, but international goods are not limited to a level of competition. However, in the quota, international goods are allowed to keep themselves at the same price. However, there's an extreme maximum of goods that can be supplied to a certain country. There's an extreme maximum of how competitive an international supplier can be in a domestic market. So it would be much better for an international company to be competitive, even if their prices are raised to a higher standard, than to be essentially forced out of the market by quotas. And then the second part dealt with the process of economic negotiation. Now, this is basically essentially very common nowadays. We can see this in the tariff war between U.S. and China relation. So essentially, economic negotiation through placing tariffs or quotas is just a process of superpowers bartering and trading goods. So the U.S. is one of the most competitive and lucrative markets in the world. So because it's so enticing, the U.S. can use its economy as basically a bargaining chip to get deals with other countries. They can place tariffs on countries that are acting out, such as the trade war that happened under the Trump administration. And it can also alleviate tariffs on countries that are complying with U.S. regulations and sanctions. But the answer to this question comes down essentially to the reduced efficiency of quotas and just the overall confusion of the market. So I think the biggest aspect of the reduced efficiency of quotas has to come from the basically the fact that the U.S. government, or essentially if this was the case, is not making as much revenue, if any, off quotas as they are of tariffs. Tariffs are essentially a tax, so the U.S. government is making revenue off of these tariffs. However, in a quota system, that is not the case.
Question 11. So the flaxseeds would be cheaper to produce in Kazakhstan because at a price of $2, they can produce 1.5 billion. The consumers in Kazakhstan also value flaxseeds more than the consumers in the United States. Part B. The price would be at $10 for 11.5 million bushels of flaxseed. A free trade curve, and the equilibrium is at 10 and 11.5. So in this question, the effects of the free trade. The buyers of Kazakhstan would be harmed because of the trade. Their consumer surplus goes down. The sellers, on the other hand, their consumer surplus goes from this small triangle to this large area right here. On the other hand, it's opposite for the buyers in the United States. The consumer surplus is higher and the producers it is lower. Part E. When the United States imposes a tariff, the world price line would go up to the equilibrium, domestic equilibrium line for both the countries. Here it decreases by 4, here it increases by 4. Therefore, there would be no deadweight loss because the quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied at domestic level for both countries, and there will also be no trade between these countries because there you can see there's no imports and exports. Here these are the imports and these are the exports. And when they shift the line to equilibrium, there is no imports or exports. Thank you.